I could have given you just the one instead of the whole rim.
It's good.
But he likes.
But he got it's less salt.
He just doesn't like.
That's
the
my favorite part of
It's
margarita.
making me thirsty. And we don't have enough margarita.
I was gonna go great with my. He just doesn't like the whole rim.
Ooh.
Just like certain parts.
Just the lower one.
You just dive
the lower
in.
third.
Just the lower third. The lower third of the rim.
Yeah. That's where all the good stuff
As
is.
opposed to the upper 2/3.
Yeah. You gotta work to get up there.
I didn't realize this is a caste society.
Yeah.
That was a dumb joke.
Yes, it really was.
Don't know where to go from there.
Clank, clank,
Clink,
clonk,
clank,
clunk,
clank.
clonk. Hello and welcome
God for
to
the salt.
Strange Happy Hour. I am one of your hosts, Brent, the Jesterhead Metcalfe, along to my left.
Yeah.
The dispatcher, Mark Plover.
Yeah, always you this time.
No, I know,
It's
I know.
always confusing. I know. So silly. I'm all right.
Job Pettit. Handsome job.
And we are here to bring you wonderful discussion about what has happened this week. Of course, there is a ton of stuff to talk about, but we don't have that kind of time. We tried to cram it in, didn't really work out very well. So we have decided to move that down to the description. There is going to be a list of things that just didn't make the cut, the runners up, we'd like to call them. But, you feel free to click on the links. There are wonderful articles about what's going on.
Yep.
However, they're not the most important articles to talk about because we are sitting here right now to tell you about
You
The
are
impor-
wrong about this.
the
I hate you so
important-
much.
I really thought he was gonna go the
the
important.
I was so mad because I cut John off. It was so good. I think we're going to start with some heavy hitters first because John and I have some fairly upsetting discussion to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with you and then me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, right now I've got government involved in basically our gaming industry right now.
Mhm.
So right now you got Trump, who is handing down possibly 25% tariffs onto possibly the new upcoming gaming consoles, which is massive.
Yeah, it was all consoles, all gaming products developed in China.
Yeah, that are being imported from China, which 96% of them are.
Because it's from China.
Yeah, exactly.
China.
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 Right now, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo got together and wrote a letter on June 17th protesting these tariffs and what kind of effects that they would have. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Right now, the supply chain issues that would cascade down would be catastrophic for everybody starting at the top all the way down. It's not just those companies that would suffer. It would be a lot of American companies, developers, software developers, everything.
It's almost like we import a lot of electronics from China.
It's the
Something like
problem is where they have to import them. So it's logistically smart to keep it where it's at because of one, what they're mining in order to create these objects is toxic. We don't want that over here to begin with. So if they do that over there, it's better for our
And they just don't care, you know?
Yeah, then they got cheap labor. But right now, so the parts, the build, and the shipment, that's all happening in China. And if they had to move that, they would have to move those facilities. They would have to get the training for the people. Like, it would be insane. And it wouldn't even technically be in this country. And then you have less people buying the consoles, which inadvertently is less people buying games for these consoles, which is going to destroy this entire market unnecessarily. One of them being a U.S. company.
Yep.
So that goes to show you how much that we're dependent on these guys. Like, it only makes sense to do it that way for them to be able to make these consoles for a price that's not going to cost us consumers upwards of $1 billion extra to buy these consoles.
Well, not only that, if you look at actual industry sales,
Just in tariffs.
yeah, if you look at game sales in general, like the U.S. leads globally.
Yes.
There's a reason why Sony took their headquarters for PlayStation and moved it here to the United States. It's because we are the largest market share.
Oh, yeah.
So why would you want to impact that?
Because he thinks he's doing the world a service for some
Of course,
those reason. Not to worry, the G20 summit is coming up this weekend in Osaka, Japan. If it goes well, these tariffs might be avoided. We will see.
So he has actually stated recently, as recent as this morning, I believe, that he is going to delay them.
Okay.
Now, the problem with this kind of language is that it doesn't actually end the tariff, nor does it actually give a definitive timeline as when they are coming on or coming off.
What it means is just a giant threat that he can slap that stick whenever he wants to
Correct.
on it for any particular reason.
So
So he's like, hey, it's basically the Cold War of the tech world service. It's like they're having an economic war through the tech service right now.
Mhm.
Yep.
So, you're fighting China, which if you watch, there's an amazing documentary on Netflix called Rotten. China is almost at the base of the first 4 episodes, and I'm not even gone to the next one yet to figure out what else they're doing to us. It's insane. Between honey, peanuts, garlic, it's nuts. Like, just watch it. I know, it's funny. Also, another thing that's happening is FedEx is having to sue the U.S. government, Chamber of Commerce, because they're being held liable because of products that are being delivered to Huawei.
Yeah. Forget that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, the
God.
problem is there's no protection. So there is something called the Export Administration's Regulations, and they offer 0 protections with steep penalties for technology that's being transferred that shouldn't be. But the problem is, how are they supposed to be liable when, one, they're not supposed to know what's in the package? It's a little creepy that their exact wording was, can't police content each and every package.
Yep.
How are you policing any of them? Pretty curious. Yeah, you have x-rays, but at what point does that, you can't tell what's in that box? Yeah, it's a computer chip, but that's all you know.
Actually, they don't even have X-rays because the problem is you can only X-ray certain if you X-ray certain packages anyway, and they react badly to them, and something happens, that's your fault.
Yeah.
Technically, you've negatively affected that package within your own facility.
Yeah.
Everything is tested for anthrax, radiation, all sorts of stuff now.
Oh yeah, no, that stuff like chemical testing. I get that, that kind of thing, but like they're not
Actual
going to
radiation.
they're not going to push radiation into the box to try to figure out what's inside of it. It's
Yeah.
just bad practice.
So unfortunately, they're demanding that they can't be held responsible for the prohibited tech that gets shipped to Huawei offices, and their exact.
If that's the case, then just put me in a box.
Yeah, I know, right? As a company, this is FedEx has stated. As a company, this is committed to complying with the laws and regulations that the countries we serve. FedEx strongly supports the objectives of the U.S. export control laws. FedEx said in a statement, "We have invested heavily into our internal export control compliance program. However, we believe that the EAR, the Export Administration Regulations, I don't know why EAR was their first." It was dumb.
I mean, what else would you put it on?
To continue, is currently constructed and implemented, place an unreasonable burdens on FedEx to police the millions of shipments that transit our network every single day. FedEx is a transportation company, not a law enforcement agency, the company concluded, which is a very important statement.
Oh, absolutely.
To be able to use FedEx as basically an enforcement agency for trade
That's
is
great.
not fair. That's
then
not
they
their
need
job.
to pay them as
And
such.
not to mention, they're not a part of the U.S. government. They are just a company making money.
Yep.
So how can you hold them liable? And on top of that, it's super invasive that our government's pretty much telling them invade all the privacy to make sure this doesn't happen.
Realistic. I mean, that's the thing. Whenever you go to an airport, the airport isn't responsible for your security anymore, just because the federal government put regulations in place. TSA does all of that now. The Transportation Security Administration. Now, technically, if you want to count that, transportation of goods could fall under their realm, or somebody under the DHS, just like TSA does. So to me, if the federal government wants to push the regulation that says that nobody can ship to this, and you want to make the shipping company liable, then you need to have your own people there to do so.
Yeah.
You have to be the ones opening boxes to inspect them, that kind of thing. Granted, the rest of us, who look at that and go, "That's stupid. I'm just not going to export anything."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ship this because I don't feel like my privacy is being breached.
Right.
Which is understandable in most My issue is that government being involved in these specific types of instances is not necessary and gives no value. Now, as a consumer of games, I definitely don't want to pay more for my consoles, not for some dumb war that he's having with Huawei.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And not to mention that all these companies have done nothing but be cooperative and have done nothing but been honestly kind to the U.S. for giving us what we kind of want.
Well, and it's an interesting situation too, because again, the issue is, I mean, we are focusing on games because we play games, but games aren't the only factor here. I mean, the amount of hit it's going to take to the technology industry in general, which is a very large, booming industry in various parts of our country, it is only continuing to grow globally. I mean, you're not only giving us a hindrance, but you're giving the competition, which would be other countries, a leg up.
Well, not only that, but all these software developers, if all this happens, you're going to have a lot less jobs available. It's going to kill them because there's going to be like not even a 20th of what's available.
Fortunately, I'm more senior our company than market, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. That's
Only
nice.
by literally one digit.
But
Anywho, so I almost don't see this affecting jobs so much. I see this affecting more just business, just our own business anyway, or inter-country business, kind of thing. you're going to end up running into problems where people just don't want to ship things because they either don't want to do it because it's of sensitive nature or whatever, like you're shipping your clothes because you're moving to Europe or something like that. You don't want people going through that crap, but you also don't want like by the same token, you don't want the government going into it. You wouldn't want FedEx going into it as well.
Yeah.
On the other note of like FedEx being responsible for the shipments.
Yeah. Monetarily responsible, by the way.
That's nonsensical.
Yeah, I know. But that's why they're suing them.
Oh, no, 100%. To me, this is another one of, without stepping too far, I guess, into the political boundary of this seems to be another
Step right into it.
quick fire decision made at the last
Without
second.
actually thinking about it.
Without actually thinking about it, literally from the highest single power available within the country. And me being the aviation nerd that I am, this is literally a follow-up straight up to the 737 MAX.
Yeah.
Trump put a presidential order to ground them. The
Yep.
FAA didn't make the decision to ground them.
Well, that was...
Don't get me wrong, it would have happened, but the
Yeah.
difference is he didn't make, like, the FAA didn't get to do the investigation to say, yes, this should be grounded, or no. These are two completely different foreign countries that, just didn't have experienced people flying them, because I've
One, the
learned some
FAA is
interesting
highly
things about them.
regulated, and two, if they
Right.
didn't do anything about it, he would have looked like a moron.
It didn't happen in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't. Don't get
It
me wrong.
started
there were
outside
some,
of the U.S. with multiple countries.
There were some issues that were found from it, but it's new tech anyway that a lot of inexperienced people offshore, overseas, are trying to fly.
Yeah.
And trust me, there are guys who have less than 200 hours who actually don't have a pilot's license that sit in the right seat of some of these airplanes because they don't have regulations that say they have to.
Yep.
Here in the U.S., on the other hand, you have to have a minimum of 1,000 hours.
Yeah. Just to
And
sit in
then
the
have to be
co-pilot?
trained in that plane for a certain number of hours with a simulator instructors and all that stuff.
Commercial only.
Fun fact, that's how many hours it took me to platinum Persona 4 the Golden
God,
on
no
Vita.
kidding. The
But anyway, like this is just another one of him, of him not, to me,
Yeah.
him not
No.
not looking deep enough into the issue or not looking deep enough into the consequences
Yes.
before just acting. And like because he has the ability to do presidential
Yep.
orders, here it is. It's immediately enacted, and you have to comply within 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Let me
and for a
swing
party
my
that
pen.
loves to talk about trickle down theory, they definitely don't support that
No,
theory
not even
at all.
Not even a little bit.
It kills me.
It is very frustrating because there are ramifications to all of these decisions that need to be thought about and planned out accordingly. It's not that we can't have an actual trade war if you want to do it that way. It's not that we can't have better regulations on this type of shipping and hold these companies accountable, but you have to actually put thought into it. You can't just come out and say, this is what we're going to do and you're going to like it.
Right.
Because guess what? Nobody's going to like it.
That's great. You could run your businesses that way, but that's not how the economy works.
Yeah, there's a lot of consequences to be had.
There aren't just 30,000 people that are, like dependent on your decision. There are a tremendous number. There are literally millions of people that are well, actually it's, what are we at? 1 point something billion, I think.
The U.S.? No, I don't think so.
No, we're not.
Like
in the billion.
352 million or something like that?
I feel like
I
we're
think we're
more
in
than
the
that.
4 now.
I don't know.
Is it?
We can,
Anywho.
you got to Google
But
Box.
regardless, tremendously more people that are dependent on.
325 million.
There you go, look at that. But
That was
we're
not a robot you heard. This is only podcasters. But nobody's taking our jobs.
anyway. It's just too much of a quick decision again, and it's just another one that's going to have bad ramifications without proper thought process.
Hopefully the trigger isn't pulled further on these tariffs for one, and then actually thinking about. I'm really curious to see what FedEx can actually pull off in this kind of litigation against the U.S. government, because it's not unheard of for a company to actually win against the U.S. government and actually push.
They're
back.
not going to have a choice. The U.S. government. This is a loophole that they have to close, and they have to figure out how it's going to be attacked.
Yeah,
they either
it's-
have to create a new department that handles this, or a department of the department.
Or I mean, like you're
that's-
saying, giving it back to
Oh,
giving
yeah.
over to the TSA
Well,
to handle, or
that's
or
the whole
give it
point
to
of
the
the
responsibility of the consumers for doing it.
Well, that's where the Supreme Court comes in. Like, if FedEx wins this case, Supreme Court precedents takes rule over anything.
Yep.
So, like, even his presidential order is not going to come over that. I mean,
So it'll be very fascinating. If you have any interest of exploring further, we definitely have some about the topic. Blah 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 blah. The
blah.
links in the description below is what I was trying to say, and I have no idea where I was going with that. But there's plenty of further reading along with. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Yeah.
To the right
Let
of
us
the
know.
Below.
You thought I was going to say below. You were so.
I was really
looking for
hoping
it.
you were just
You're
like mind, like just
Nope.
fixed on it.
Guess
Just-
what? I'm always here.
That's concerning.
Moving on to my topic. This one is slightly more frustrating for me personally. We have discussed similar topics in the past. This is another Jason Schreier expose discussing the working conditions at Activision, of all places. Treyarch specifically. So Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is the most recent title that they've worked on.
Lops. Say it right.
I'm sorry, Blops. I apologize. And there has been a quite in-depth description of the working conditions specifically for the QA testers. So he does go into the fact that this studio suffers from similar issues of various developers where there's tons of crunch, too much overtime, people not being able to live their lives. We have been down that road.
I feel like we've beat this stick with a dead horse, way too many times now.
I agree, except for this interesting wrinkle of the fact that there are a ton of contract workers at Treyarch. Contract workers, not really new to technology in general. A lot of companies utilize them. Specifically, Treyarch tends to utilize them as a QA testing bed, right? So they hire a bunch of contract workers. They work 24 hours total. So they have 12-hour shift from 10 to 10 and then 12-hour shift from 10 to 10 in the building to test the game nonstop. They hire hundreds of these workers and they treat them like second-class citizens. They're in the building what is wrong with you?
Wow.
They're in the building in a
Wow.
building in which the property is owned by someone else. So the AC turns off at night. They're located in a very hot region. So they're working at 80 to 90 degree temperatures at night trying to test these games. The company will bring in food for the
How many times does a PlayStation have the blue screen at that
Yeah.
kind of temperature before they're like, okay, this is a little much?
They waited 3.5 months before they finally got a response to actually turn on the air while they were working there. Wow. The company hires in food, and here's a great quote of what happened during a summer little pizza party to celebrate the summer interns. This is a quote from Jason Schreier's article. It's also in our description. But one Friday afternoon, a few weeks ago, the developers at Treyarch held a happy hour event to welcome the summer interns. There's pizza, beer, and jubilation for everyone in the studio behind Call of Duty Black Ops 4, except the quality assurance testers who have to leave shortly after they got there. Quote, QA was told they're only allowed to be down the party for a max of 20 minutes, and we, quote, really shouldn't drink anything, quote, because we're still on the clock. It sucks, but honestly, we're pretty used to getting these sorts of rules when they do parties here, end quote. That's
Holy
true for
cow.
parties. Any sort of food catering, they were told they have to wait an hour minimum before everyone else at the company ate before they could go and eat. Sometimes they're told they're not allowed to eat at all. They're also not allowed to take breaks. They get their phones taken away. Like, it is insane.
Oh my God.
The way they treat these workers. And they're contract workers. We've been through the argument. You don't have to work there. All of that jazz. Understand all that. The problem is QA is not only one of the most important jobs when it comes to video games because they are testing all the bugs, making sure all these games work properly.
They're
in
the ones that make sure your
long run.
customers are happy in the end.
Correct. But it is a huge misconception from the common world that doesn't really know the technology industry that QA testing is the best way to get in the industry.
Yeah.
So they believe, especially from a movie like Grandma's Boy, which has
Yeah.
perpetuated that stereotype, that if you work in quality assurance, it's just your step in the door. All you have to do is talk to people in management, start passing your ideas along. But the management structure has built this entire system in place to where they're looked down upon even by people below, not just the C's, but anyone who's running, the producers, all of them just look at them like they're not worth it.
It's a whole pariah system, essentially.
Correct.
Like they're just literally, like you said, they're second-rate second-class citizens. They're just not even part of the club here. Like,
I made a joke before this show started about a caste system, but that's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And they're kind of stuck because a lot of people are trying to move up. They're trying to find a different realm.
What country is in this again?
It's United States.
No, that's cool.
It's here.
I'm pretty sure there's labor laws for temperature
Not for
and amount of
contractors.
work.
Not for contractors.
contractors can sign away everything. Like, if you're a W-2 employee and work for a company
Pretty sure you don't.
as
You
a
can't give away certain human rights.
well, that's the thing. It's your right to refuse it. Is the difference
Because you're on a contract. You can refuse a contract and leave.
Doing contract work anyway, for example, for developers, it's actually common that overtime is not at time and a half.
Yeah.
It's actually at standard rate, even though that's a legal requirement that overtime gets paid. But that only
As long
applies
as that overtime is committed as this, it's fine.
that only exactly that only counts for companies' actual employees. Technically, under that, you're a contractor. You can sign away those rights.
It is a very frustrating situation because there are people who are coming in the problem with working those types of hours, with working that kind of system, is that you end up killing yourself, literally. Like you're so tired, you're so strung out, you're so exhausted that the prospect of going to find another job is nearly impossible unless you quit. But the rate they're getting paid, because they're contracted quality assurance, is $10 an hour maybe. And again, like you're talking about, they're not making overtime. Like, it is just a terrible situation for everyone. And people who work the night shift are stuck in the night shift. Again, you're working 10 p.m. to 10 a.m.
I'm sorry, but there's a line that people need to draw.
Yeah.
And I've always said that, companies are pretty cutthroat, and I get it. It's a competitive market. You want to be on top, but these guys make so much money. I don't see how that's even irrelevant.
To that point, here's the crazy part. According to the 2018 study, because I couldn't find the 2019 findings, Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard, who owns all the studios that are involved with Call of Duty, including Treyarch, made $2.5 billion in a bonus in 2018.
With a B.
I'm sorry, million. My
Okay,
bad. Whew.
I was about to say, I was like, what is his actual pitch?
In my head, I was
What's
like,
their revenue?
in my head, I was like, don't say billion. Don't say billion. It is a billion. $2.5 million. But you can't tell me that you can't shave off a couple $1,000 to cover food for these people?
For a bonus.
Yeah.
For a bonus,
Yeah, it's a bonus. That's just his bonus.
Can we go back to? Can we step back to the CEO
Yeah.
of Nintendo who was it? Took a massive pay
Satoru
cut.
Iwata and all of their upper management
all of the executives
took pay cuts in order to keep their employees at full pay rate while the company was not profitable.
because they made a mistake.
Yeah.
Now, this company is making a mistake just on a different level. Man, this thing's giving me some serious. Woof.
I took Tums before this. It's a frustrating prospect because it reminds me a lot of the discussion we had about Epic and Fortnite, where Call of Duty, though arguably, depending on who you talk to, not nearly as strong as it used to be, is still a powerhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, this household we sit in has how many people who have competed at some point in time, how many people we support competing it on our channel alone we support. And I'm totally not saying that we need to turn around and stop everything we're doing and get rid of it, because guess what? You've already bought the product.
I actually was considering going back into trying to get into the competitive mode.
Yeah.
And I was like, after this, I'm like, no, I'm going to convince everybody to drop this game.
But yeah, when it comes to this next title, which they've already announced, it's coming out this fall, think long and hard about whether or not it's really worth investing in.
Your dollar speaks a lot.
Just to clarify, though, this is just Treyarch. This is not
the expose was on just Treyarch. We do not know the working
I don't
conditions.
care because
we don't know Infinity Ward or what's
Activision,
Warhammer?
Sledgehammer.
Activision is no stranger to crappy things.
Yeah.
Well,
They
to
know.
be fair, they're the publisher. They don't make the they don't make the decisions on that. They do to the extent of you're making the game this time, or you're not because you're giving us too much bad press with this.
So normally, yes, except for the fact that they actually own these studios.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they own all three of them.
They're also
I
the one
thought it
that
was
tore
only
apart
Treyarch.
Blizzard.
They own all three.
Or only, I'm sorry, Infinity
No,
Ward.
they have snatched up all three of them. So they are the actual people who not only pay the paycheck, but make all of the mandates, all the decisions, all the hiring practices, everything comes from up top. So that's one of the reasons why you can assume
That the rest of them
the
are
rest of them are
involved.
similar.
I mean, just tell you the truth. I mean, even if you look at how they're treating the QA, imagine how they treat everybody else too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's only going to get worse and more cutthroat as you get to the top.
And again, we've talked about these practices, and some of them are voluntary. Like I was reading Jason Schreier's book last night.
It is totally voluntary to be a piece of shit.
But I was reading Jason Schreier's book last night, and we talk about him a lot, but he is the one who is constantly bringing this stuff up. But it was Blood, Sweat, and Pixels talking about the development of Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
So quick segue into Uncharted 4 because it'll take a
Sidebar.
couple minutes. Thank you. A sidebar. I needed that to be faster, but it didn't work out that way.
Wasn't prepared for it.
So, from The Last of Us, Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann were the directors of The Last of Us. They had just finished off right as they were finishing the product. They were moving on to prototyping, taking vacations.
Yeah.
Oh my God, her name is the old director. I can't remember her name right now.
Stacey Hennig?
Hennig is her last name. I don't think it's Stacy is her first name. Doesn't matter. Amy Hennig.
Amy Hennig.
Amy
Thank you.
Hennig was told to leave by Naughty Dog. We don't know the circumstances. It's still not been talked about. But Bruce and Neil were brought into an office and said, hey, we need you to take over. Can you do it? And they had crunched hard on The Last of Us. The Last of Us was the hardest crunch game that Naughty Dog had ever developed up to that point. They agreed to do it on the terms that they could take over the game entirely, do it the way they wanted to, and that they could leave the project when they felt comfortable. So they would work for 6 months and realize that was impossible. And they crunched on Uncharted 4, which was the worst crunch that Naughty Dog had seen up to that point. So it was worse than The Last of Us. It was so bad that Bruce Straley, who Naughty Dog's located in LA, it's like in the Santa Monica area. He lived on the other side of LA. So he was leaving the office at 2 or 3 in the morning to drive home, would then sleep for a handful of hours, come back at 7 a.m. so that he could be the first one in the office so he can handle any complaints and start work. And he would do this every day of the week. Every day of the week. So he eventually decided, screw it, I'm just going to go ahead and rent an apartment. And he rented an apartment next to the office.
Oh, wow.
He paid extra money out of his pocket to have sleep right there. Like, that is a passion-driven project.
I feel like there's a certain point where I'm going to go, here's my rent for this. By the way, you're going to go ahead and comp that.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that is a passion-driven. That is his decision-making. Naughty Dog has no say over that.
No kidding.
He has decided that. That is not what we're seeing here. That is complete opposite of what we're seeing here with these QA testers.
This is literally one step away from being whipped into work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but with the low pay that it is, the hard work that it is, and the conditions that it is, and to be honest, in the social structure, caste system is the best thing I can think of the way it is.
I mean, what's bad about this too is without this kind of news getting spread out to the masses that would want to do QA work for them.
Oh, 100%.
You could have a mass layoff of like every single QA tester you've got in the middle of, a game QA get quit. Just literally walk out the door one day with no notice. And they'll have people sitting in there literally the next day.
Yeah.
To do it because they're like, you mean I get to play this game all day, every day? Yeah, that sounds great until they realize how terrible the working conditions are.
Your job is to break that game.
Yeah, but say, not only that, you're literally it's mind-numbing work because you're playing the same thing over and over. Like, it is cool, don't get me wrong. You're like, oh, it's the middle of development.
Well,
it is part of the
process. If you're on online development, at least it's a little bit more
yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The problem is that there's such a ready workforce that's ready to take over the second there's a position available.
Yeah, and it's gross too because they know it and they're taking advantage of a bad system.
100%.
Not to mention, like this whole food thing, it reminds me of wolves.
Yeah.
The alpha gets to eat his fill before everyone else does, and then it goes down the system. And I'm like, man, one of these days, someone else is gonna want to be alpha, and you're not gonna like it.
Society works here,
yeah.
so
Well, what's fascinating to me too is because we work at a technology company. We've worked at a couple together, and we understand how the process works. Of like, hey, there's food available. It's put into a common area. It is readily available for everyone to grab. So I can only imagine it's a similar process here, except for the fact that they're just told no.
Well, I was even thinking back to specific meetings we had or whatever that were
for
internal company people only, but probably should have been shared with everyone, including the contractors that we had on site.
Yep.
But it was in our industry anyway, or here anyway, like our development was very much even. Everyone who walked in basically had sort of the same share.
Yeah.
If we were doing a pizza day or something like that, or ice cream or something, that kind of thing, everyone got in line with whoever because nobody really thought any different of, oh, you work for such and such company.
I would hand you the card
this one.
Lick and lick it.
Because they were actually doing the work.
Because we were treating them like actual people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is because I just keep coming back to the fact that like they have a commissary, I guarantee, in their offices somewhere, like some space in which there is a general area to get food, and these people are passing by and they're not allowed to touch it.
You just say commissary.
Yeah,
it makes me think of a prison.
It's
it's literally
it sounds
a prison,
like an institutional prison.
And they're the guys who have to wear the off color, jumpsuits or whatever, so they're the last ones in line.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to start having to wear a certain badge.
I was waiting, armbands?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man,
it's literally one step. I mean, like seriously, the way they're being treated is one step next to that.
But the article's super in depth. It's very long. He writes novels, which if you like reading is great. If you don't like reading, you should take the time to do so. You should take the time because it is well worth the endeavor. And again, if you've already bought the game, you love Call of Duty, I completely understand. But one of the ways to communicate is to speak with your wallet and through other forms of communication. In this day of
blast it on Twitter, blast it on Facebook.
We have these means.
Unfortunately, I already wasn't going to buy Black Ops 4, so it isn't going to matter anyway. But I'm just going to continue to not buy.
Not buy.
And I mean, even if we got one other person to really think about this, like this goes great until later on. But like this is something that has truly happened that is going to make you rethink how the world works.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this stuff, like you don't think about it, you don't see it, you don't know about it. And a lot of these companies rely on this kind of anonymity in order to continue their business model.
So your
And
politicians.
the way it's going away. I mean, like for instance, like I was telling you about that Netflix special with garlic.
Yeah.
They were having prisoners in China unpeeling the garlic, and it's illegal for us to be buying prisoner forced labor products from that. Where it's illegal to import prison labor based products, which.
So they were just
I mean,
lying about
yeah,
it?
I mean,
they're lying about it. They're
technically our own inmates in country
was
produce
It's not
just
illegal to
about to
do
say
it.
that.
It's not
Produce-
illegal to use that.
produce license plates and other things like that
They haven't done that in years.
at like
Oh,
two-
they do more now because
Yeah.
of for-profit prisons. They put them to work real
that's
hard.
fine.
yeah, but they
Well,
but
no,
they
I mean, like, it's
technically
not
they-
illegal for us to do it for our own benefit.
I
It's
understand what you're
illegal
saying.
for them to use their prison labor for us to take advantage of it.
That didn't work out.
That was
that
a
way,
human
so-
rights thing because they don't have the same kind of.
They don't treat their
standards we
prisoners
do.
the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't give them, bunk beds and TVs.
okay.
and
I think you got
massages.
that backwards because you said that we are okay doing that. They're not.
We're okay using our own labor. We cannot use their labor because we have a higher prisoner like.
So technically, if
Standard,
we
I guess.
exported the products that we had our prisoners produce, it would be
Okay.
It should be okay ethically because the fact we have a higher standard of living for our prisoners. Arguably,
Uh,
if
It's
you're
just
talking
us
about the
taking
way,
unless you're
advantage of
talking
our
about,
own
like-
prisoners.
like Western Europe or something like that. Unless you're talking,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like other places where prisons are actually decent.
we can't export over to was it Sweden? and
Sweden,
Switzerland?
yeah.
where they have,
where they
like,
have televisions
yeah,
and
cushy beds.
yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
But again, I'd be very curious about your own opinions here.
Yep.
Definitely just think about it. No one here on this little panel, this table here, is telling you what to do with your life. However, it's important to kind of take this into context because everything's connected. We were talking about tariffs earlier. It's all connected, whether we
Yeah, man.
realize it or not. You do matter. Your options, your actions matter.
Take into account we all put our pants on the same way.
I mean, I put my pants on backwards first and then forwards, so I don't know if
That's
I'm the
because you
same
get
way.
dressed in the dark.
You're not wrong. But moving on to a less terrible topic, we're going to talk to you, dispatcher.
Welcome to the shit
Visions-
Sunday.
visions of the future. Actually, it's much less of a vision now. It's much more of a reality.
I would say I had like a outline.
Yeah. Google has the new Google's new OS Fuchsia, which I don't understand.
It's a type of
I
pig.
don't understand because it technically is a typo.
Yeah,
'Cause
it's not
Fuchsia-
spelled with an S.
No, it is, but it's after the CH. Fuchsia.
Fuck yeah. That's what I'm pronouncing correctly,
That's not
Google.
fair. That's not fair. That's how it's spelled. It's not the same.
Oh gosh. Anywho, Fuchsia is Google's new platform independent operating system.
Okay.
Literally meant to run on every device, from the no screen home devices like the one I have behind me here,
Mhm.
to your mobile phone, to this laptop, to the desktop downstairs, to the tablets that you might buy with Android built into them, to even the little tiny smart home devices like the little Wi-Fi controller that controls these lights on the backdrop.
And it's an OS separate from Android.
Correct. It's
Okay.
built similarly to Android, but it's purpose built. The kernel and the operating system are purpose built to be flexible.
But like you wouldn't, because you said specifically the Android phones, you wouldn't need an Android
Yeah.
operating phone. Technically, if you
but
took a blank
I
phone
say
and put
Android
Fuchsia.
phone out of habit. I
just want to make sure we're
it
clear.
would-
Just
it
so
would-
you get an idea of
You
what the
literally end
device
up
is.
calling them a Fuchsia phone.
Correct.
At that
Yeah.
point.
I just want to make sure we're clear.
Right. So
It takes the place of Chrome. It takes the place
Yeah.
of Android. It
Right.
takes the place of everything.
So currently they have a runnable OS that's available for Chromebooks, or a specific Chromebook. I think it's like the Pixel Book specifically.
This Chromebook.
Various Intel NUCs.
It's a
Anyway,
short library.
You better believe it. One page.
One chapter.
and like one Asus device.
Okay.
So they're very limited right now. The Pixel Book's going to be the most common that you'll see it on. Engadget actually, or I'm sorry, Ars Technica has a great video anyway, sort of showcasing it. There's really not that much to it now, but it's very available to use. And if you want to play around with it, it's got a new UI scheme and everything like that. But Google is sort of all inning the entire ecosystem from beginning to end for this.
Okay.
So its programming languages have all been integrated. Dart, Go, well, Dart and Go are the two big ones anyway that they're trying to push.
Yeah.
But obviously C and C++ are available.
I was about to ask any more common languages.
C and C++ are available. Python's available, and Rust is available. There are more compilers coming, and
Do
other
me
people are
dirty,
building
Google.
out for them.
I said, just doing me dirty.
Yeah.
Do you dirty?
They're doing me dirty.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's none of those languages I prefer to code in.
Yeah. I like Go. I'll stick with that.
I haven't really played with Go, to be honest with you.
I recommend it. Anyway, so this is supposed to be the next generation for them.
Okay.
This is going to replace Android eventually.
Got it.
This is going to replace Chromebooks, the Chrome OS eventually. But the purpose is anyway, and the reason that they're building it out anyway, and is the idea of programming for one thing to make room for every device.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it to where anybody can like learn this language and then program for everything, so they have more to work with.
Right. So like your Android TVs will eventually be, converted to this and so on and so forth. The idea is like right now with Android, you can program for your phones, your tablets, your Android TV devices. And actually that's about it.
And then you would use
But
whatever workaround you can to communicate with a Chromebook or something along those
So
lines.
it's gonna get
Yeah.
rid of like all the middleware that you're gonna need in order for things to talk to each other and
Well,
just create one big OS.
It's not even necessarily like reducing the middleware. Technically, the middleware will still have to be there. The idea is it simplifies it because then you end up with the same components on both ends.
Yeah.
So from a development perspective anyway, you have, let's say, an object anyway with a certain set of parameters that are associated with it. Now, in the current system anyway, you'd have to, like, for example, if you wanted to create something for Chromecast, that you cast something to the television, like we used to do with the timer, you have to have the Chromecast component that's built in JavaScript, which is a web language, like specifically for that Chromecast and built out using its API. But then for your mobile app, you'd have to have it built out in Dart for Flutter or Java for native Android or even JavaScript again if you're
Yeah.
using some sort of web-based system. But the idea is if you have the same languages and the same systems on both places, you have one set of code that you can copy to both places.
Yeah, the portability is fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the ability to be able to maneuver from device to device. And I mean, taking a game, because I use games. We know I love games, so I use games as my example all the time. But taking a mobile game and porting it over to any like Chrome OS, like it's a process you have to go through. You have to make sure everything's set properly.
Right.
Instead, it literally is plop one in, plop it over here. Okay, now let me just adjust these parameters so it fits the screen properly and takes in the proper input. I'm done. Like
Right.
the amount of work is way reduced. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's sort of the concept. Now, the big thing here is that they've literally written a brand new kernel from the ground up. This is not Linux or Unix-based, period.
Interesting.
They're calling it Zircon.
That's awesome. I knew you loved it.
It's literally considered a microkernel, not a kernel.
I hope it's not pronounced Zycon.
Mr. Zircon doesn't need bolts.
I was about to say
His only currency is pain.
it's not Zircon because it's not ZUR. It's ZIR.
I don't care. It will always be that way.
I know it's awesome and I love it, but at the same time,
But it has all the same features that you would normally get out of a kernel, essentially, but in a much smaller scale and with the same portability that Linux has or that
Interesting.
Unix has.
So is there hope that this kernel would not only be utilized for Fuchsia, but for other operating systems or even...
Well, so Fuchsia is a completely open source platform.
Okay.
So the operating system and the kernel themselves are open source and readily available,
People
so
can
you
just kinda
can
play
tinker with
around
them
with
if you
them,
want to. And Google's always operated on that principle.
Yeah.
Android as an operating system, including the Linux kernel
Yeah.
underneath it, has always been open source. So they're just sort of continuing that trend, and I like it because
I
then
agree.
other companies who want to come in and like Huawei, for example, if they wanted to build themselves off of Zircon,
Yeah.
they could, because they're not going to have access to anything else. Anyway,
I was about to say Bluetooth. Nope.
but I like the idea here because from a developer perspective, this simplifies things tremendously.
Oh my God, yes.
Like the ability for me to build a desktop app, a mobile application, a web application, or actually not even need to build a web application
Yep.
because I literally have dedicated ones for both of those, but then one for your Chromecast and then one for your Apple or your Google TV or Android TV, or actually I guess it would be Fuchsia TV at that
Yeah.
point. But like I guess that portability makes everything better. And Google's vision here is to have...
You can't mark me.
No, I'm doing it.
Every time he does it, you need to put up what it is.
But I like their vision of having a unified operating system to take this over.
I mean, it's incredibly intelligent, and we've seen multiple companies move this way. Like Apple is slowly, and I mean glacier speed, trying to head this direction. Windows the same way, though they took two different routes where Windows is like, everything's going to be built off this and mobile.
They finally throw out the mobile platform,
Yeah,
so there's that. But
But this
That means
makes
a
a lot more
smaller
sense
group.
where you are building from the ground up.
A smaller group can make one platform or one thing for everything instead of having multiple teams work on the same exact thing.
And so I think Google's in a much better place here than Microsoft would have been with Windows.
Oh, 100%.
Because they did not own anything in the mobile phone market. Nobody wanted to switch to a Windows phone because there wasn't not a whole lot of app support for it. There wasn't a whole lot of development support for it. And the operating system was kind of bland as a whole. But Android has already...
I'm sorry, we have to interrupt because I know B Scotch is watching and you heard it. Shots fired. Windows Phone sucked. Anyways.
He had hope. I didn't.
I wanted Windows Phone to be okay. A good friend of the show here loved Windows Phone and refused to get rid of it despite the fact that it was antiquated, old, and kind of dying like a dinosaur in your pocket.
Jeez.
He probably bought one of the last 2 phones that produced it.
He did, actually, yes.
Wow.
I know.
That's dedication. Anyway.
Does it receive phone calls?
So
It does its job.
the point here is that they can kind of go with more of an Apple system too.
Okay. Yeah.
So they can still go true Google fashion, open source. Everything's open to develop. You can develop for cheap or for free if you wanted to.
Yep.
You could sideload apps. You can do the whole thing if you want to, and do the traditional Google route. But it gives you the interconnectability that you would normally get out of Apple devices anyway, because their operating systems are literally built to interconnect.
Yeah, it's the exact same. So I mean,
Now, they've even got hardware to interconnect, which Google's not stepping to that level, but the idea is if you have a kernel small enough to run on any device, smaller than a Raspberry Pi,
which is nuts.
right, then you literally have the ability for every device to have
do you want me to
interconnect,
go
have the same basis.
That's
together.
like the average size of a Raspberry Pi. Like
It's not much.
it's rectangular. It's not circular, but yeah,
It's about the size of this. A little smaller than your phone, actually.
it's smaller than the phone. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I didn't use the phone.
Oh. Yeah, that's about right.
There you go.
So like having those features, having the interconnectability, it, like definitely gives promise for what could be and what could be available to the masses without having to pay a premium like you currently do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I for one am super excited for this.
I think it's great. I think it's super smart on their part. I mean, again, like you said, they're in a position where they can do it. It makes perfect sense. Making it open source like they did with Android means there's going to be a plethora of devices, a plethora of actual opportunity there. People can really play with this. But I mean, taking it out of the commercial standpoint, like as someone who just wants to play and hack with stuff, like having that capability of being like, cool, I'm just going to run Fuchsia on all these devices and make my own little robot. And it's going to interact with...
You could build out your own whole smart home if you wanted to.
You could build a security system off that. If you're... Now, be smart about it. Obviously, don't leave it open. But like you can do all kinds of things with that.
Right. I mean, Raspberry Pi already opens up a lot of those things, but the idea is if you have operating systems that open the interconnectivity between them and literally give you the similar platform to develop on across an entire household,
Yeah.
super awesome.
Yeah. It's very exciting.
Very excited.
That is actually really, really cool. Let us know if you're excited about the future.
Future.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
Do it
get
again. One more time. Fuchsia. 3 for the gold. Fuchsia, baby.
The 5.
Let us know in the comments above me because that's where Fuchsia is. Oh. But I believe it is now time for last call.
Last call.
There's a little bit of a delay.
What
really
was
weird.
that?
Yeah.
There you go, like a
I
man.
don't know. It's a little weird. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. Of course, we detailed earlier in the show, but we do have those that did not make it, the runners up. They are in the description below. It'll be 5 to 10 articles, including a couple of them about, my God, my brain is dead today. Apparently, the possible Matrix 4 coming out.
Yeah.
Sony quickly
Interesting.
changed their PlayStation Plus game from one to another. You have to read that article. They're all fairly short and enjoyable, so take a look. Now on to our shout-outs. Of course, I do want to once again detail that we are trying to plan a game night, possibly next week when Mark and I are not on the show. We don't know. That's up
they're
to
lazy.
John.
Right.
Yeah, because I just want to sleep for once. So please let us know if you have any game ideas, any formats. We have a couple of ideas that we shall throw out, but we want your opinion as well.
Being naked's not off the table.
We also want to shout out, of course, our streamer of the month,
It's hot.
Resilience. It's RESI1IENCE. I help you there because you got to find him on Twitch. There should be a link in the description as well. However, he is constantly streaming a little bit of Realm Royale. Please go and show him
Apex
some
Legends
love.
as well.
Apex Legends Season 2 pass came out. so
Also,
that should
some
be perfect.
awesome marble race game. Super into it.
If you
Really
are
excited.
an Amazon Prime member, you can throw him a subscription for free once a month. So please show him some love. The final shout out is also apparently there is a new Humble bundle. Is a Humble PlayStation Indie bundle. So it has a plethora of games, including the Talos Principle, Grim Fandango, and Broken Age. A lot of cool stuff in there. $15 nets you 9 games on the PlayStation.
Wow.
So you can't get too upset about that. Moving on to our question of the week. John brought this to the table.
Yeah.
The question is, what piece of media have you consumed that changed your perspective or viewpoint?
Something that changed it, whether good or bad, or strengthened an ideology or belief. And for me, I'll start.
Go ahead.
It's actually Ghost in the Shell.
Interesting.
To believe, like, I was very literal when I was a lot younger. Like, everything was cut and dry, black and white. Now my favorite color is gray. It's for a reason. It's because that show just gave me a whole perspective into what being human actually is, like what constitutes being human at what point in time. Like we talked about, like, you replace the boards on the ship. At what point in time are you still that same boat?
Yeah.
And so, like, they were talking about cybernetics, which we're getting into as we're getting older. We're replacing knees, replacing hearts, replacing livers. Like, eventually we're talking about cloning parts of our body to be replaced.
Interesting.
So it was just a very interesting and surreal look at what human beings seem to be going towards. It's lately sci-fi seems to just come true, so it's a little scary at the same time.
Worth visiting for sure.
Yeah, definitely watch it if you don't mind. Like, just a lot of really interesting thought processes that really help me kind of like identify what it is to be human.
Yeah.
And what I believe it is to be human. I know a lot of people like to say, "Oh, that's not a humane way of doing things," and I'm like, I think that really truly depends on your definition of humane.
Well,
what humanity is.
It's really nice. You can find Ghost in the Shell on pretty much every streaming service. It's on Funimation, Crunchyroll, Amazon, Netflix. Some of them are purchasable, some of them are streamable, and it comes in multiple forms. There's not just the original, but
you have Arise, and then you have multiple different seasons of Ghost in the Shell.
So there's a lot there. So definitely check it out. I'm with you there.
Laughing Man was probably my favorite.
Oh, Laughing Man's so good.
Yeah.
So mine's actually, I guess, a little bit more cut and dry. Anyway, Brent, I think you and I had talked about watching this before, but there's an entire series called Adam Ruins Everything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I mean,
oh my God, that guy's an eye opener.
So first off, it's a small comedy show, but everything he does is cited. Yeah. So it's very authentic. You can follow the sources if you want to look up the articles and whatnot.
He even tells you when he's fudging a little bit, like, we don't really know, but this is how we see it.
Yeah. Exactly. This is what it looks like, kind of thing. So, like, everything from like engagement rings to like TSA security theater,
the
kind of thing. So good. Like all kinds of things. Or what was it? Bathroom products was one of my favorites. The fact that Listerine used to be a floor scrub. Like all kinds of stuff like that just happened to they really blew my mind, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a show I recommend anybody check out.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, the comedy is really dry sometimes, but I think just about everybody can relate with it.
True TV, if you have cable, YouTube, he puts all of his skits on there, and Netflix has collections.
I was about to say Netflix does, yeah.
Yep.
So very, very cool. Mine is a book. I don't think that's really surprising, but it's kind of surprising. I don't know if you're gonna guess this book. It is Of Mice and Men.
Damn.
Of Mice and Men. So if you have never read this book, this is a spoiler. It is Steinbeck. Yeah. This is going to be a spoiler warning for a book that you may or may not care about reading, but you should. It's very short. It's roughly 100 pages. Steinbeck very rarely writes a whole lot, and it involves 2 gentlemen, one of which is mentally handicapped in like the Depression era United States. And the ending, once again, I'm just going to spoil some, giving the warnings here. Kenny is his name, I believe.
Lenny.
Lenny is the mentally handicapped kid.
I can't believe I remember this.
Accidentally kills a woman. Not intentional. He was just wrestling around with her, and he's a big old guy, and he ends up cracking her neck. Yeah. And he has no concept of what he has done. He has no idea what he can do. And his only friend in the world is they're sitting there trying to save him. There's a lynch mob out to kill him. And you have 10 pages left in this book, and you have no concept of what's going to happen. And so he takes him over by the river, and they stare out in the water, and he shoots him in the head and kills him. Yeah. And that was the first book that I read that I was like, oh, not everything is fair or happy. Like, that's just how sometimes the world works. And it's not it's not a good thing, but it's also not a bad thing. It's just life. And sometimes that's okay. And I love that book. I adore that book.
It also has another powerful message too, that, you know, he took that upon himself to do that.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he saved him a
Agony.
lot of pain.
Agony. For
Because
sure.
he had himself pain of having to watch someone that he had been taking care of go through so much pain. Much like we look at euthanasia nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like that message. It's super powerful book. Yeah, good choice. I totally forgot about that book because my mind was going George Orwell.
Yeah. No.
Like I'm
another one
Orwellian
worth
fan.
reading for sure.
Between
I need
1984
something else
and
to-
Animal Farm, I love those books because it taught me
telling you,
about
man.
hierarchy and truly how unempowered that you truly are.
You
in
don't
this
get
world.
2. You don't get 2.
I just did.
You did 3 actually.
Yeah, isn't it great?
But let us
yeah,
know.
if you haven't read 1984, Mice and Men, and Animal Farm, definitely read it.
Definitely. If you at all are curious or interested of sharing with us what piece of media that you've consumed has changed your life, please let us know in the comments to the left of
Below.
Mark. It's like a clock. I've said this over and over again. It just
And
changes everywhere.
Fahrenheit 451.
If Fahrenheit 451 is another one, don't watch the HBO show. It's a terrible movie. And we will see you all next week. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ba-da-ba. Buckshot.